Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of No Woman Left Behind. Today we're going to tackle a topic that I know so many of you can relate to: people pleasing. You know that nagging habit of always putting others first, even when it drains you? That's exactly what we're going to dive into today. I'm excited to introduce you to Amy Greensmith. She is not just a leadership coach. She is, I'm telling you, a powerhouse when it comes to helping women stop playing small and start owning their worth. Amy's all about cutting through the BS that holds us back and showing us how to break free from those exhausting patterns of trying to keep everyone else happy. And I know a lot about that. In this episode, Amy's going to share some straight talk on what it really means to be a people pleaser and how that habit can secretly sabotage your career. I'm also going to share a story about my childhood and how that shows up in my adult life as well. More importantly, she's going to give us some practical tips on how to flip the script, definitely set boundaries, and then find your voice, especially in those tough corporate environments where it can feel like you are constantly having to prove yourself. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by trying to please everyone at work or worried about how to say no without guilt, definitely stick around. I think this conversation is packed with insights that will definitely help you reclaim your time, your energy, and your confidence. So let's get right into it. Are you ready to accelerate your career? Whether you're just starting out, making your move up the ladder, or ready to take the fast lane, there's one question you need to ask yourself. Where do I stand? Introducing the Promotion Readiness Quiz. In just a few minutes, discover if you're an emerging leader, a progressive pro, or a career trailblazer. Get tailored tips and strategies to help you grow, elevate your skills, and move forward faster. Curious? Take the quiz now and step into the next chapter of your career with confidence. Unlock your potential today. Your career breakthrough starts here. Take the Promotion Readiness Quiz now. Hey, Amy, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Rosie. I am so looking forward to connecting with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. Okay. Well, we know that you are, actually, I should say, I know that you are an expert on that chronic people pleasing. So before we actually start talking about how you can stop or convert or reframe that thought process in your head, let's talk about what is a chronic people pleaser. What is the definition for you?
I'm really glad that you asked me this because I find that a lot of women who are in the corporate space or maybe they're high achieving, they tend to have this perspective around people pleasing being someone who is maybe really demure, maybe a little bit more of a repressed posture, not speaking up, maybe a wallflower, always getting stepped on. But I think that's a really myopic view of what people pleasing is, because I think that it really is anytime you are placing the wants, needs, and opinions of other people ahead of yourself at some kind of personal cost. That is people pleasing. So oftentimes I'll meet with these women who are, in these high powered executive positions, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not a people pleaser." But if I say, "Are you highly invested in the opinions of other people?" They're like, "Oh, absolutely." And so perfectionism is a method of people pleasing because you're thinking, I need to be flawless in order to be loved or accepted or appeased. And there's a nuance in people pleasing too that I don't think gets discussed enough, which is that it actually is a self-preservation mechanism, which can very much come into play in the workplace. So I'd love to share that with you too, if you're interested.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, first of all, I think the way you explained that chronic people pleasing is really important because you're right. When I think of people pleasing, it's like, well, I'm a total people pleaser. I'm going to just say from the time that I was little, I never wanted to get in trouble. I had two older sisters and I always saw them getting in trouble. I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not getting in trouble. So I'm what I call a rule follower
Yep.
because that's where I'm comfortable. Those are my boundaries. If someone tells me not to do something, I'm not going to do it. But I think the important piece for me there was at the cost of my wants and my needs. And I think that's the bigger difference because I don't care if I people please, for something that's irrelevant to me. I'm like, I don't
That's
care,
right.
but when it comes at our cost, that's where it really, you pay the price for people pleasing.
Well, and if you think about the type of people that we typically want to attract into our world, we would often say, and I would assume you would say, I want to attract people who are authentic, who are transparent, who
Yes.
value honesty and integrity. And if you've ever had even a friend in your life where you've said, hey, do you want to go do this? Or should we make these type of plans? And they go, yeah, yeah, sure, that's fine. And you're like, do you have a different opinion? And they're like, no, that's fine. And you're like, I don't know if you're being honest or not. So when we talk about who we want to attract into our world, we're not going, hey, a bunch of liars. I want a bunch of liars. I think it's really important for us to understand that we also have to be the person we want to attract, whether that is subordinates, coworkers, people that we are in collaboration with, intimate partners, our family. We want people in our world who are authentic.
Yeah.
And when you are around somebody who will be clear and kind with you, you feel so much more safe. And that's incredibly important in leadership roles
Yeah.
for your subordinates and your co-parts to know that they are safe with you, that you will kindly and authentically express what's true for you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that self-preservation.
Mm,
Obviously, human beings, there's that, old adage, the fight and flight from where, the dinosaur era and all that stuff. So we want to always try to be safe. That's kind of like the first thing that we want in our world, be safe, be basic needs met, that whole thing. So how do we do that self-preservation by people pleasing?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the fight, flight, freeze, because there's actually a newer one that's been sort of in the psychological community discussion around fawning in order to stay safe. So if we look at sort of primitive humans and what we would do in the face of impending threat or danger, we would fight, flee, freeze, or potentially fawn. So if we're looking at that in a primitive standpoint, let's say we're about to be attacked by a mountain lion. To fawn in the face of that sort of a threat would be to maybe try to find some other meat and go, here's some meat, kitty, kitty, here, go over there, go grab that meat. So it's a different way of addressing some sort of threat. Now, all of those primitive fear responses have modern iterations. And the modern iteration of fawning is people pleasing. So I'm sure that many of you can relate to this. Anybody who is a woman or is femme presenting or has been socialized as a woman, we know exactly what that's like to placate a man in order to stay safe so that we don't get murdered or followed to our car or something put in our drink. And I think also many people listening can relate to having maybe a volatile caregiver or somebody who took care of you as you grew up, where you learned that walking on eggshells or being quiet or taking care of them, making sure that they're always okay, allowed you to fly under the radar. So
Mm,
we cannot negate the fact that people pleasing has a very real place in our world. And one of the ways that that shows up the most prevalently for us is in the workplace, because oftentimes we do have to twist ourselves or contort in some way to keep our livelihood, to make sure that we can put food on the table. So there's a delineation here, and the delineation is, am I searching for this approval out of self-care, out of self-preservation, meaning I need this promotion, I need this job, I need this stability? Or am I searching for this approval to outsource my self-worth?
Oh.
Meaning, I need this person to love me. I need this person to approve of me in order to feel valid as a human, in order to believe that I am worthy or I am enough. Those are two very, very different motivations. So that becomes the question or the inquiry. When you notice, like, wow, I'm really shapeshifting or kind of placating to this individual, am I doing that from a place of self-preservation, or am I outsourcing my self-worth? And sometimes it's a little medley of both. And that's where it can get a little more tricky.
Hmm. Tell me more a little bit about outsourcing your self-worth, because obviously, we're talking to women in the corporate space that are trying to advance in their careers. And so, and actually, by the way, Jamie Kern-Lima just
Mhm.
released her book called Worthy in February, and she does a fabulous job at kind of differentiating that self-worth versus self-confidence. So she says
Mm.
that self-worth is kind of like the foundation of the house, which is in the earth. And then self-confidence is the external house that's on top of the foundation. So I think that's a really good way of looking at, your self-worth. But tell me more about outsourcing your self-worth. What does that look like?
Yeah. So this might be trying to do an extra great job, not because that's of importance to you, but more so because of what that will look like if somebody doesn't think you checked all the boxes appropriately, or if you haven't gone over and above what that might say or mean about you. But one of the things that I have seen very consistently with folks who work in corporate is they will oftentimes have a manager or a boss or somebody above them who is emblematic of someone else in their life, usually a father, a mother, maybe a past ex-partner who maybe demanded that you prove yourself in order to be loved, in order to be accepted. So
Yeah.
sometimes we'll look at that person that we are working for and we'll go, oh, wow, this really looks a lot like how I had to have perfect grades for dad.
Oh my
Because,
God, Amy, I'm going to have to stop you right there.
okay,
Okay,
okay.
so here is my deal. This is so funny. So when I was a kid, and my dad did this too. So I'm one of 5 siblings. And my dad, I think, looking back, I think he thought he was trying to motivate us when he did this. So
Sure.
if I came home, I remember this day specifically, it was fourth grade. I was living in Mexico City at the time. I'm 100% Mexican. So we were living in Mexico at the time. And in Mexico, the grades are 5 through 10. So 9 and 10 being an A. So I came home and I got like a 9 plus. And my dad's like, well, why didn't you get a 10? And then the next report card, I come home and I get a 10. He's like, why didn't you get a 10 plus? Well, this was a story of all of us, including my children. He still does this to this day. And it's so
Mm,
funny because when I got my first job, I'm like, Dad, I got a job. Did you ask for a raise? If I
right,
got a raise, did you ask for more?
right.
And it was like that our whole lives. And in his head, I know that he was trying to motivate us, but what ended up happening is exactly what you described, because I'm an extremely driven and motivated person. And that's always it was always, especially when I was a kid, from I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to
Yeah.
get in trouble. And I never equated I need to be loved, and so I need to be liked. And so that totally brought up like memories when I was a kid. Oh
Yeah.
my God, Amy. Imagine a space where your career aspirations are supported by a community that truly understands your journey. A space designed for women like you, ready to elevate their careers. Our monthly membership isn't just about career advancement. It's about growing confidence, gaining clarity, and building lasting connections. From expert training and monthly workshops to a custom career roadmap, everything you need to climb higher is within reach. Join a supportive community where group coaching and networking turn your professional goals into achievable milestones. Celebrate your wins, big and small, with a network of women who are as invested in your success as you are. Are you ready to unlock the leader within? Join us and let's be brave, be bold, and take action together.
Well, and you're, and I don't mean to make light of this, but you're not alone. Like that is not uncommon, that we will so frequently look to new relationships that look somewhat similar to ones that we've had in the past as a do-over, as an opportunity to get it right this time. So if I didn't get that 10 plus for dad, maybe now I can get it for, my CEO that I work for. And we don't necessarily consciously realize that. We think that we are just overachievers, perfectionists. We put all of these seemingly noble monikers on it.
Mm-hmm.
When what we're actually doing is trying to heal past wounds through a new relationship. And that's not always a bad thing. But I think what we have to recognize is that our self-worth stands outside of any approval or any criticism. So it's funny that you bring up Jamie's book, because I too have a sort of a house analogy that I've used for many, many years. And it's this concept around if you think about yourself as a house, and we all have these sort of intricate different rooms, some that we would not want anybody else to see, and then some that we show to everybody else, right? But the house stands alone. It has its own worth, right? And then on the proverbial porch of our house, we will have people who come along and drop giant piles of crap onto our porch, right? Oh, I gave myself a thumbs up for that.
Yeah.
And that is like getting passed over for the promotion. That's being told, no, we don't need anyone right now. That's being told, I want a divorce. I don't love you any longer. It is any sort of uncomfortable emotions that we feel on the spectrum of human feeling. Now, conversely, we will also have people who drop off gorgeous gifts on our porch. And those are things like honors, accolades, commendations, compliments, love. But both of those things do not change the worth of the house. They just change your experience. So I always like to say, I'm not currently accepting any piles of leap into my house. And even though it would stink everything up, it's not necessarily going to change the worth, but it's going to change the experience. And the same is true for people leaving gifts. If you give me a compliment, does that make me feel good? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean, okay, now I'm imbued with worthiness. It just simply means that I'm experiencing something that feels good on the spectrum of human emotion. But far more often than not, we take what we feel and we make that mean something about who we are. So if we get passed over for the promotion and that hurts, instead of allowing ourselves to go through a grief process, we take how that feels and then we make that mean I must not be good enough. We make this grandiose assessment about who we are. Forever and always, Amy is not enough, not worthy. Instead of, this situation sucks, I don't suck.
Oh, I love it. You're totally speaking my language. I love everything that you just said. I went through, you may have heard this, landmark education, and I did this back in like 2007. And that's where my personal development started, because I was going through a really bad divorce at the time. And you're absolutely right. Before landmark education, I would get a letter from my lawyer and I would just totally be scared and afraid and cry and this divorce and whatever. And then landmark education is 4 days of very intense therapy, it's not therapy, but reflection work, self-work. And we talked about, we put meaning on so many things that are meaningless. And, after landmark, and I'd get a letter from the lawyer, I'm like, oh, it's just a piece of paper with words on it. And I'd be like, Okay, no big deal. Not that I didn't feel the emotions, but I was able to feel them, release them, and then reground myself and then move forward. And I think that's exactly what you were just talking about. And that's huge in the corporate world because, yes, if you get passed up for a promotion or if you get some negative feedback or whatever, then take that information, process, feel the feelings that you're feeling because you're human. You have emotions. You can't control your emotions, feel them, and then the next day figure out what your next game plan is, whether for that constructive criticism, take whatever you can and apply it to your work so that you can improve and get better, or what can you do for that promotion that you didn't get, things like that. So I
Yes.
absolutely love everything that you just said. And in that vein, I kind of want to shift a little bit to finding your voice, because
Yes.
everything that we just spoke about are kind of symptoms of a root cause, like those childhood wounds that you were just talking about. And in Landmark, they always say that we're all adults, bodies of adults, but like souls and minds of a 5-year-old, because those wounds that happened to you and when you were 5, you're living into them still if you don't recognize them and heal them and all that good stuff. So when
Yes.
you are going through something like, I didn't get the promotion and now I'm at work and now I have to figure out how to reposition myself, speak up for myself, find my voice, and I'm
Yeah.
feeling all this self-preservation. How do you move forward from there?
Well, one thing that I think really warrants underlining here is that a lot of times there is truth to the idea of the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? This old idiom, because we are in such a fast-paced, really untenable, in my opinion, way in which a lot of corporations operate. And fortunately, I think people are starting to reimagine and re-engineer that. But we're in such a fast-paced hustle culture that most people are thinking about, and this is your leadership, this is your bosses included, are focusing on, have we checked that box? Did we get this done? Did we do this? And unless it's on their task list to recognize things that I may not normally see every single day, unless that's on their task list, you're going to get missed. So we have to be vocal about what's going on with us. And I think it's important to recognize that it's not always coming from malicious intent. People
Mhm.
aren't always going, I'm going to deliberately not acknowledge anything that Rosie's doing so that she feels like crap.
Mhm.
It's usually that they're just caught up in their own agenda, their own levels of criterion that they need to handle. So I think taking a little bit of that personal aspect out of it and going, okay, no, I actually have to go to bat for my cause. And I might be the only voice capable of honoring what I've got going on. Like, it might not be my supervisor who speaks up. It might not be my co-partner who says, oh my gosh, check out what Amy did. I might be the only voice. And depending on your specific scenario. So one thing that I think is really important is to use your emotions as guide points, because most of the time that will be the entry point. We'll be either really frustrated, we'll be overwhelmed, we'll be angry, we'll be resentful. And all of those emotions are there as messaging. They're there to say, hey, pay attention, something has gone awry. We need you to understand what the problem is so that we can move towards more comfortable emotions. But far more often than not, when we're resentful, we just want to stay in a place of why our boss sucks, or why the system sucks, or why whatever is not working right. And if only that would change, then everything would be fine. Instead of going, okay, wow, this resentment is really indicating to me that I'm not feeling acknowledged and I'm not feeling like I'm being seen for the effort that I'm putting forth, or I'm being pulled in too many directions, or I'm being micromanaged, or whatever it happens to be. When you nail down where that emotion is coming from, then you are better suited to actually advocate for yourself. Then
Mhm.
we get into the whole concept of how do we broach difficult conversations in order to be heard the most effectively? And there's an entire science to that. But part of that is, in my opinion, I think one of the best ways to go about that is to get conversation consent. And that can start a conversation that could be quite tenuous or precarious off on a much better foot. In psychology, they oftentimes will call it a soft startup, where you're, instead of saying, we need to talk, or I need to put myself on your calendar, or we need to book some time out, is to actually say something more soft, like, hey, there's some stuff I'd really love to share with you. Is there any chance that we could get this on the calendar in the next couple of days? And what you're doing with that sort of an invitation is you're saying, I respect your time and energy. And that already puts sort of a beginning marker that will set you up for success so much more smoothly.
I really like that approach. However, I was just thinking, would men do that same approach?
Yeah. So this is interesting because I think that you can work with when I used to work in cosmetics and we would talk about connecting with people who were different than you, we would call it style stepping. And it was this way in which you acknowledge and kind of mirror what is being presented to you. So if somebody is coming at you with a little bit more of an abrasive tone or edge, you can mirror that with the same level of strength. You don't have to be sassy, acrimonious, rude, biting, but the same level of intensity or energy. So for example, if somebody's coming at me and saying like, Amy, I needed these on my desk by 2:00, and say, yes, absolutely. I understand that that was the case. And due to this, that, and the other, that's not going to be possible. So I'm showing up with the same level of intensity and I'm mirroring that authority, but I'm not being rude, or I'm not saying, screw off. I'm not going to do it. It's using that same level of authority right back at that person. So, and again, that really depends on your company dynamic, because in some situations they pretend that that's applauded and it's really not. And we also have to keep in mind, are you searching for approval because you have to have this job? Are you being motivated from a place of self-preservation, or is it I'm needing their approval because I don't feel valuable as a human, right? There's some stuff to work out in that case. But I do think far more often than not, especially folks who are a little bit more aggressive in their approach, they tend to respect folks more who mirror that back to them. If you cower, if you get more, kind of like, oh, yes, yeah, of course. Oh, absolutely. They tend to be like, oh, okay, no backbone on that one. Right. But if you even holding your body up with that assertiveness and that confidence can show that you are not going to back down in those sorts of situations. Here's the other thing, too. The way that men have been doing things hasn't been working. So using them as a barometer of what we should be doing is not necessarily going to get us very far. So I personally feel like there are a lot more things we can embody in order to pave the way of what strong leadership looks like. And I have a real difficult time with the words masculine and feminine, because I feel like it over genderizes stuff that doesn't need to be gendered, like emotion. Emotion does not have a goddamn gender. So I prefer strength and softness. Sometimes strength is being called for. Sometimes softness is being called for, whether or not you are male, female, non-binary, etc. So I think if we can recognize, yes, there are going to be many times when strength is the tool necessary, but there's also going to be softness that's being called for that can move the needle far, far more than if I only resided in a place of strength.
Yeah. And I appreciate you kind of pointing that out, as far as, how men behave isn't necessarily a barometer, but there are some men that are soft and kind and still firm. Sure. And I've always admired those men that are allies to women, that support women's, advancement and empowerment. And yet they still have this firm leadership, and yet they're soft and kind, because you don't have to be a jerk when you're, trying to lead a team. And I think that's where men sometimes get in trouble, and they don't recognize that the people that work for them are human beings with emotions. And sometimes they just forget. And you mentioned this earlier, when you're a manager, you have your own stuff, you have your own work, you have your own results that you have to perform. And you still have this team that they're reporting to you, and you still have to act as their professional development counselor and their manager, and, try to be there for them. And, there's just so much there. So that's why I always like say, when you're an employee, an individual contributor, you really need to take on your career as you are the pilot of that plane. You are the one that's driving your career. You can't let your career be in the hands of your manager, because they're busy. And like you said earlier, it's not that they're intentionally trying to ignore you. They're busy. They're not thinking about you.
That's
it's like,
right.
yeah. And, human beings, we're so worried about what everybody else says about us, but they're not worried about us. They're worried about themselves. So that's so
That's
funny.
right.
That's a good point. Now, we're talking about finding the right words. So
Yes.
for me, when I'm trying to help someone in an interview, for example, I always say you need to craft your script. So you need to have your story vault. You need to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to say in response to different things. So, but in the day-to-day, when you're not really thinking about that conversation that you need to have with your manager in a preparation type format, that's when I think you really need to pause and find the right words. So how
Yes.
would you suggest finding the right words?
So I'm going to give them to you. So yay, you found them. So this is such a great example, because you're right. If you have a conversation on the books, you can prepare. But if somebody catches you off guard, what are we going to say? And we go into our autopilot. And usually that is fueled by our defense mechanisms, which are to get aggressive, to run away, to freeze, or to placate, right? So having sort of an arsenal of scripts or statements that you can use when you're caught off guard can be incredibly advantageous. So saying something like, very simply, like, wow, I was not expecting you to say that. Or, you know what? I need a little time to wrap my head around that. Or, wow. I mean, just even saying wow can give you just a few minutes or few seconds to go, oh, you know what? I'd love a little time to stew on that. Or can I chew on that for a minute? Or I'm really taken aback by that, or I'm taken off guard. You can say what's there, but pick one of those and rehearse it. You have to get in front of the mirror and rehearse it over and over and over and over again. Like, wow, I'm taken off guard by that. Wow, you really surprised me with that. I really need to chew on that. Say it over and over and over. Just pick one. And I think of those kind of like bridge statements, that it's helping you bridge the gap so that you can get to that place where you can actually process a little bit better to figure out what you actually think. Because think about if the situation was reversed. If I'm bringing something to you, Rosie, I want you to have the expanse of being able to chew on it, to look at it from different angles, and to not just react as opposed to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are approached in that way, and then you say, you know what, I'd really love to give that some good consideration. Can we circle back in even 15 minutes? Or let me just run to the bathroom real quick, and then I'll be right back ready. Take even that short little burst of time can help you formulate a little bit more of what you might want to say about whatever's on deck. Yeah, because if we don't, we tend to go into what's commonly referred to as being the yes man, or in California, I'm from California, we would sometimes call it being the totally girl. Like, totally, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, totally. So and this, by the way, goes for any time that you tend to say yes to things without contemplation. This can even be in your personal life. If someone's asking, like, hey, can you watch our dogs while we're on vacation? Or, hey, can you bake some cupcakes for your kids' school? If they're just coming at you right away and you don't have time to think, one of the best things that you can say in those situations is, how soon do you need an answer? I would hate to not be able to come through for you. So I want to make sure that I have a very committed yes. How soon do you need an answer? So having some stock phrases to help you with those.
Oh, I love those too. I think the one that really resonates would be if someone like surprises me with something. Wow, I didn't expect that, because it's like exactly what I'm thinking, and it gives you that couple of seconds to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? And I love the, you know what, let me just go to the bathroom, come back, and then you have 2 or 3 minutes to figure out what the next, best thing to do is. And
Yeah.
along those lines, that's where you start creating those boundaries, right? Because if it's something, you can even come back from the bathroom and say, you know what, I really need more time to figure this out. Let's meet in an hour or tomorrow or whenever. But creating those
Yes.
boundaries is really important. And I know a lot of people talk about boundaries, but when you talk about creating boundaries, where do you think people can start, especially if they're like the example that you just said, they're people pleasers and they say yes to everything. I actually knew a person in the corporate world that was really, really good at their job. And because they were really good, they kept the leadership team kept asking them to do more and more work. And they were like, yes, 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 until they were at a point where they're like, I can't do anymore. I'm getting penalized
That's right.
because I'm good at my job. So let's talk about boundaries.
That's so awesome that you brought that up, because I call that being penalized for being excellent. And part of it is how we speak up. And in fact, I had a situation with a client, and she's given me the permission to share this, where she was vocal, but the way she was vocal did not allow her to actually be heard. So she's very gregarious, she's very outspoken, and she has a lot of camaraderie with the people that she works with. She works in a medical institution. And so she would be kind of jokey and somewhat passive aggressive of like, sure, just give it to me. Just I'll take care of all of it. Right. And so she was speaking up, but she was doing so in a way where she could easily be dismissed. And if you think about it, the rationale on the opposite side is very commonly, well, I'm sure if it was that serious, she would tell me. I'm sure if Rosie couldn't handle it, I'm sure Amy would speak up. But she's making a joke about it. It's so easy, even it's not ill-intended. It just makes logical sense of if it was that big of a deal, they would tell me. So also, what oftentimes will happen is if you are excellent, which I know everyone listening is, the other party will make up two truths. Either one, you like doing it, that you prefer to do it your way, that you want you are controlling. This happens a lot in marriages too, by the way. And the other one is that it's easy for you, that because you don't speak up about the sheer volume of labor or time that's involved, that it's just easy, that Rosie just magically makes it happen. So unless you say, first of all, A, I don't like it that much, and B, it's not that easy for me, or here's the ramifications, the implications of that request, then they're just thinking that you're this miracle worker. And so that can be a really incredible lead-in to say something like, I do pride myself on making it look easy, but I want to really express to you sort of the impact that these sorts of responsibilities are having on me. And instead of saying, you're doing this, you don't respect me, blah, 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 but to come at it from I don't think I've actually expressed to you how things are landing on my side. And how would you ever know? That is unbelievably unfair to you. If I'm harboring resentment about my workload and you have no idea, that's not giving you any respect to be able to rectify it. So I want to share with you exactly what's kind of transpiring on my end. And I'm hoping that we can figure this out in order to, and this is very important, improve productivity, secure the bottom line, doing something related to their corporate values, bring it back to something that's of merit to the actual company. Because that, when you say, I'm bringing this up in service of less turnaround, higher ROI, checking off KPIs. If you're bringing up stuff like that, they're way more likely to listen instead of this is Susie from accounting just, bitching and moaning about workload, right? Mm-hmm. One of the places, I think you asked me, like, where do we start with this? I'm going to circle right back to that emotion that we were talking about earlier. Typically, we are being vocal. We're being vocal to the wrong person. So if you're pissed about your workload, it's likely that your partner, your spouse has gotten an earful, your best friend knows exactly what's up, and probably your therapist. But if it's worth complaining about, it's probably worth talking to the person who could actually rectify the grievance.
Mm.
So one of your entry points is, what are the things or whom am I chronically complaining about that I haven't taken any action on? And I'm not talking about blowing off steam or just venting or releasing a tough day. I'm talking about a habitual pattern of complaint, a pattern of behavior where you come home and you bitch and moan about something, this project that you're on or whatever, but you have not been vocal in a way in which you can be heard in order to rectify or advocate for that situation. So this particular client that I was sharing with you, I said, I think we need to re-engineer this approach. I think you need to go in and have a conversation with your superior. And I think you need to lead with vulnerability. And this is something that is terrifying. And again, in a very patriarchal corporate world in which we live, has been frowned upon. However, we know that based off of our limbic system and how we respond to emotion, humans make decision based off of emotion almost always. It leads us because we want to feel a specific way. So we buy this thing so we can feel freedom or we can feel expansiveness or whatever. But we have to understand that leading with vulnerability does not mean bawling our eyes out or sharing our deepest fears. It just means stating what's true for us without all of this facade and guard up. So she went into this conversation and she said, hey, listen, I think that as I've approached some of these situations that we've been trying to work on, I've done you a disservice by not expressing just how unbelievably important this is to me. And her cadence and her delivery was so starkly opposite from how she had approached things in the past. And this was a few months ago, and her superior has completely changed, and they have reworked the ways that they're communicating. And it all had to do with her going in with a sense of vulnerability, sharing what's true and what's real for her. She didn't bawl her eyes out. Vulnerability doesn't have to look a specific way. It's honestly just expressing what's true for you emotionally. And it can work wonders. And the other party, this is the great piece about that, the other party feels so much safer with you because they know exactly what's real. They know what's going on. What's going back to that authenticity piece of like, oh, I know what's really happening with this person. Now I can course correct and help accommodate because they're not just blowing smoke up my ass, right? So yeah, leading with some vulnerability.
Amy, I love everything that we talked about. I could talk to you for hours. This is all so cool. Now, I want to shift the conversation a little bit to you. How did you become a certified life coach and hypnotherapist? Because obviously you're very eloquent, you're very experienced in those phrases, those key phrases that people can say. So tell me a little bit about your story, kind of how did your career start off, and then how did you transition into becoming a certified life coach?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I kind of got my corporate chops in the cosmetic world. And so I had very much a big girl job when I was in my early 20s. I was a corporate trainer for a prestige makeup brand. And so I had sort of like the company car and the assistant, and we were traveling and doing all of this awesome fancy stuff. And I remember that and this was in the early to mid 2000s, I was driving home from one of my locations in this stupid company car. That was it was kind of like the golden handcuffs. And I was listening to Kelly Clarkson's Breakaway. And it dawned on me in that moment that I had not given myself the permission to enjoy just basic human things like music, because I was on the phone doing business during my commutes every single day. I didn't even listen to music anymore. And so it was sort of this epiphany while I'm kind of scream singing, break away, I'll spread my wings. And so I get back home to my house and I've got false lashes like sliding down my face. I kind of look like the Joker. And my husband goes like, oh my gosh, what happened? What are you okay? And I kind of held my fingers up and I said, I am this close to completely losing who I am, completely losing myself. And I realized that in all of that ambition, in my love for creativity and the arts, I was making decisions that were not catered to my ultimate fulfillment. My relationship with my partner wasn't stronger. I was missing all sorts of key events for the people in my life. My relationships weren't closer. I didn't really have much of a social life to speak of. I had really become this job. And I remember thinking at the time, this is in my early 20s, if I'm working myself to the bone like this, I want it to be for my vision, for my dream, not for somebody else's. I don't want to be on spreadsheets about lipsticks at like 11:30 at night. This is not what 80-year-old Amy is going to say. Yeah, I'm so glad you were doing that. Right? So coincidentally, at the time, my partner knew that I was wanting to shift, and he heard a life coach on the radio. And he said, I heard about this job. It's exactly what you do. It's been what you've been doing since you were little. You need to check it out. And he was so convicted about it that he sent away for materials and brochures for this particular coaching establishment. And that's sort of the impetus behind all of it, and ended up getting certified. There was a lot of ups and downs in between there. And then in 2019, ended up doing a very comprehensive hypnosis certification that spanned about 2 years. So, and have just kind of been a connoisseur of additional modalities throughout that time period. But a lot of the vocal speaking up stuff came from my personal life. And I'll kind of spare you the gory details, but I grew up in a very, very conservative, highly dogmatic religious community where there was a lot of that notion that you were talking about, of being the good girl, not getting in trouble. Don't rock the boat. We have all these idioms for it. Don't open up a can of worms, sweep it under the rug. And they're all ways to say, just fall in line, shut up and be quiet. And so a lot of my personal kind of coming of age into my own voice was separating from my parents and my mom specifically, and saying I don't subscribe to the faith traditions that I was raised with. And that really became sort of the catalyst to helping me find the vernacular, the words, the semantics, because I'll tell you what, at the beginning, I was incredibly adversarial and combative. I was full on in my fight response, and I wanted to fight about everything. And it wasn't until many times of walking back my delivery where I remember telling my mom, hey, listen, I still feel very strongly about what we conversed about, but I should have never said it to you in that way. And for that, I'm sorry. And you don't deserve that. That's when I kind of realized, oh, you can actually give voice to things. You can ask an adult child to move out of the house. You can end a business partnership. You can ask for a divorce, and you can do those conversations with poise and grace and kindness. And that really has influenced sort of the modality and work that I do now.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love this conversation. This is probably one of my favorite, Amy.
Oh, Rosie.
This is really, it hits home to like the actual essence of a human being. You know, it's not even talking about careers at this point. It's talking about the human themselves and how to deal with your emotions, and then how to be able to communicate what you're feeling in a very eloquent way. So love this conversation. So Amy, if you were to leave our listeners with one takeaway point, what would that be?
Well, I think for most folks listening, I want to underline again the question of, two things. The question of, what do I chronically complain about? Whom do I chronically complain about? And really checking yourself around, is that a grievance that I've given them the opportunity to clean up? I love to say you need to at least give people the opportunity to be what you need. If they have no idea that that's what's going on with you, that's on you. Or if they have an idea, but you've been passive aggressive, you've joked about it, that doesn't count, y'all. You have to give people an opportunity to be what you need. So take an inventory of those things that you've been chronically complaining about. And the other is to check in on your modus operandi of people pleasing. What is that motivation? Am I doing this because I genuinely need this job? I need this promotion. I need this raise. Or am I doing this because this boss looks a lot like my mom and treats me a lot like, and this is feeling like I need to get an A plus or a 10 plus? Am I outsourcing my self-worth in this manner? Because when you get crystal clear about that, your actions become a lot more clear. And then you get to decide what's the most powerful way for me to address this. So those are sort of the two questions that I would encourage you to lean on for discovery.
Wonderful. All right, Amy. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolutely lovely conversation.
Oh, I had a blast, Rosie. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, I promised you a powerhouse at the beginning of this episode, and I delivered with my conversation with Amy. I am taking some key components from the conversation that I just had with Amy. The first one is the people pleasing definition. I think this is absolutely so critically important to understand. So, Amy highlighted that people pleasing isn't just about being overly nice. It's actually about putting others' needs ahead of your own at a personal cost. And that was a really key thought for me. The fact that we're putting others' needs above our own is a habit that can sneak into your professional life often without you even realizing it, especially in those high pressure environments. One of the things that I really appreciated about Amy is that she was giving us some powerful phrases that we can utilize in our day to day. So, for example, someone at work came up to you and asked you a question that came out of left field and you were really surprised about, you can always say, "Wow, you just surprised me with that. Let me think about it." And then take 2 or 3 seconds to regroup and figure out how you're going to proceed from there. But the powerful phrases that she provided us were absolutely phenomenal. The second thing that was pretty enlightening for me is that self-preservation mechanism. Amy explained that people pleasing is often a form of self-preservation, a way to stay safe in both personal and professional settings. And so it's really important to distinguish when you're acting out of genuine self-care versus when you're outsourcing your self-worth, meaning that once again, you're putting others' needs above your own when it doesn't serve you at all. So I think that self-preservation is as well really key. And then the third thing is finding your voice. We talked about the importance of speaking up for yourself at work, whether it's just asking for what you need or setting boundaries. Your voice is the most powerful and important tool in advocating for your career. One of the things that I'm constantly talking to my clients about is being prepared. And the more you're prepared, the more you gain that confidence to advocate for yourself. And the same thing when you're thinking about having a conversation with your manager about whatever, you need to sit down and really think about the words that you're going to be using. So I call that crafting your script so that you are prepared and ready to talk to your manager. The more you prepare in your career, the more confidence you gain over time. Amy left us with one actionable tip. She encourages us to do an inventory of what or who we chronically complain about. So ask yourself if you've allowed that person to meet your needs or address the issue. If not, it is time to have that conversation with honesty and vulnerability. So I thought that was really key because you complain to your husband, to your spouse, or to your partner, spouse, whatever, best friend, family member, but you never go to the source, the root cause. All of Amy's contact information will be on the episode website. So now that you've absorbed all of these powerful insights, it is time to put them into action. One of the things that I would love for you to do is start by taking the promotion readiness quiz. This is for you to see how ready you are for that next big step in your career. The quiz will give you a clear picture of where you stand and what you can do to move forward to advance in your profession. And if you haven't done so already, check out the Unlock the Leader Within membership. This community is most definitely designed for women like you who are ready to overcome corporate challenges and step into leadership roles with confidence. One of my objectives is very simple but powerful: to help you build unshakable confidence. Again, preparation begets confidence. Master the art of self promotion and create a clear roadmap for your career advancement. The links to both of those will also be on the episode website. So, with that, thank you for hanging out with me and Amy. And remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.